I have with me Vijay Udasi, Senior Vice President of Nielsen India. Thank you so much, Vijay, for talking to Bloomberg Quint. Let's start with how has demand actually panned out in the first half of the current financial year?
So if you were to look at from a FMCG standpoint, right, if you take the first half of the year, the growth has been a little sluggish. Overall, we are talking of a growth of close to about 8% in terms of value growth, right? This is largely led by food consumption to that extent, right? Food sector seems to have played a far greater role in this growth compared to the non-food sector.
Mr. Vijay, can you also give us an idea about volume growths that we've seen, especially in the second quarter?
In the recent quarter, essentially, again, the same trend has played out. Rural, for a change, has continued to grow faster than urban, first and foremost. In terms of volume consumption has been led by staples and food products, followed by home and personal care. But in home and personal care, the volume consumption has been in low single digits to that extent. So really, the volume growth has certainly happened. It is far sharper, far greater than in the Q1 of the year, but clearly led by foods to that extent.
Okay, and any particular reason, why personal care hasn't been picking up?
See, if you were to look at in terms of how the environment has played out, right? People talk about sentiments, people talk about how the inflation has eased out, the GDP is growing faster, but it takes for a while for consumption to pick up. FMCG is a habit forming sector, right? Unlike a euphoria, let's say for example, people talk about 7th pay commissions, people talk about, the bonuses which people are giving. All of them and the sentiment has a far bigger and immediate impact in some cases on things like automobiles and two-wheelers and durables and stuff. From a FMCG angle, it's a gradual play out, right? It's a habit forming thing, right? And when times are tough, when particularly if you take rural to that extent, right? The rainfall has been okay this year, but the prior 2 years has been dropped. So which is why there is a little holding back on it. And FMCG per se is not the first category which comes to the consumer's mind, especially when the surrounding categories are the ones where there's a lot of involvement in growing on it. From a personal care standpoint, I think it is also consumers holding back till the time they see. See, foods you don't hold back. From a food, it's a daily staple category, right? And new users keep on coming into the category from unbranded to branded. Personal care, it is usually discretionary spend, and when times are tougher, discretionary spends usually take a little backseat on it.
Also, can you elaborate a little more on the pricing action that was taken by consumer companies, especially the staples in the
So in terms of pricing, if you were to look at food, actually, because of the inflation going down, food pricing has been very, very subdued to that extent. Most of the players, if I were to go back to last year, from last year started offering promotions to a lot of consumers just to take it into account of how the commodity prices went down. That has in fact has a positive impact on consumption, which is why on the food sector you actually see consumption going up, right? On personal care too also, the prices have certainly gone down. So the pricing actions have been more promotions which have been given into account to the consumers. A little bit of promotions have happened. Particularly if I were to look at the last 2 quarters, the increase in prices has not been to the tune of more than 1.5 to 2% to that extent.
Okay, and also can you give us an idea as to which segment took a massive hit in terms of demand in the consumer space?
See, in the consumption space, the sector is mostly the personal care sectors, right? As I talked about, these are discretionary ones. The ones which still are bellwethers from a consumption are the food and the staples category, right? They benefit both from existing users continuing to do more and from new users coming into the category and switching from unbranded to branded to that extent.
Okay, how has demand for Ayurvedic products actually panned out in the last 2 quarters, and which are the segments which are actually suffering because of this sudden move in?
So let me address your second part, right? Which are the categories, which are the segments? If you were to look at from an Ayurvedic or herbal and natural, there are different people, different consumers articulated very, very differently. Segments such as hair oils, segments such as over-the-counter products like Chyawanprash, honey, they seem to be benefiting from it. Similarly, categories such as skin cleansing take a far more interest from consumers into using. Skin creams is another segment which we see some momentum. Oral care is another segment which we see momentum of both herbal and natural products panning out far more. And it is not just a phenomenon of the last 1 or 2 quarters. If you were to just take, and I'll just a benchmark if you were to take, if I were to take the FMCG growth rate on a CAGR basis, right? Just the last 4 years, FMCG would have grown at about 8.5%, last 4-year CAGR. If I were to take herbal, natural Ayurvedic products combined as an entity, the same segment would have grown at 15%, which is 2x the growth rate of the overall. So it is not just a new trend, it has been happening gradually over the last couple of years. It also shows how consumers have changed and evolved. Fair credit to also marketers. See, if you were to think about it, it is also about what innovations we bring into the place. How do we also make consumers feel safe that some of these products are natural and are beneficial to them, and consumers try and adopt. I think the rate of trial and adoption has certainly increased, which is why this sector is also seeing some sort of benefits and consumers lapping up some of these products.
Okay, taking past record, even the toothpaste category has started to see some, some movement because of Ayurveda coming in. So, so can you elaborate on that a little bit?
If you were to look at this, again, not a very, very new, while the rate of acceleration has increased in this case, but if you were to go back 5-10 years ago also, there have always been natural ingredients within the toothpaste. Whether you talk of Meswak from the erstwhile Balsara group, now Dabur to that extent, or you talk of Himalaya, some of these products have always been present. Same way, salt ingredients in toothpaste have always been there into it, right? India has been such a market where in the past, and if you were to take Vico for example, which has been there in the country for the last 40 to 50 years, some of these names, some of these brands have always been present and available. The acceleration is happening because of greater consumer adoption and also because marketers are talking about it. So the two together is making a difference. As I said, a greater amount of role also takes place from innovation in the category. As the rate of innovations and new introductions keep on coming into the category, the consumers also tend to try new products. As the rate of trial increases, you also find people lapping up into it. Some will stay on and some will elapse.
And so can you also elaborate a little more on the strategies that consumer companies are taking to fight this trend, to stay competitive in the game?
I think it's not about fighting this trend. It is also about being inclusive in the trend, as I would put it, right? See, the trend is here to stay. As I said, this trend has been there for the last couple of years in any case. It's a question of what is the unique and distinct proposition which each one of them is trying to bring in. This also requires some aspect of uniqueness and an aspect of believability, right? As I said, in some cases, a lot of companies in India, and these are all, and India has been the home to Ayurvedic in any case, right? It came in from India to that extent. Herbal, natural products have always been known to us. It's a question of what products and what benefits and what uniqueness and believability you bring in that will make a game changer into it. So a lot of companies are bringing in back their old products which consumers have used and have tried and tested in the past. Similarly, a lot of companies are also trying to innovate and saying, can we do something differently in this space, bringing in new innovations in new segments and new sectors for that matter. I think this rate of innovation is what is causing the change and increasing. So if you were to put it, people are saying it's a trend which we need to make it as a friend of us rather than fighting against it. And so that shift in mentality is also aiding the segment.
Have we seen too much of movement in the last 6 months towards another sector in the Ayurvedic space?
In terms of, no, the sectors are essentially the same, right? The segments are essentially the same. Is the rate of change in terms of introductions and the innovations that has changed over a period of time.
Thank you so much, sir, for talking to Bloomberg Quint.
Thank you.